Good day. Yes, it's time to discuss the exam scope with you for the upcoming exam. Now, remember, this is not 100% what you are going to get, but it's almost there. And I didn't look at the question or the solutions, else I would have given everything away. Now, very important is when we look at the exam scope and preparation is that you will not be provided with legislation or case law. So therefore, you must know where the legislation are in your notes, or you must write it down. By now, you should know it by heart. So there you refer to your lesson 5.2 and your lesson 6.3 in the study material for your legislation. And then case law, refer to the summary of case law. Please make sure that you've got it. And I will also give you a list of which case law is important. And then for references, by now you know you've got the CAS reference manual. And then when you are supposed to discuss something, use headings because headings makes it much easier for the markers to mark. Now, again, remember 1 mark per fact. And that is where most of you go wrong, is that you give 3 facts for a 10-mark question, and although you are 100% correct, you will not get more than that. Now, you will have 3 questions. Question 1, 18 marks. References. There you refer to assessment 1. You know it by now, how to do it, 3 blocks. And then question 2, 27 marks, including 3 marks presentation. Always remember your presentation is counting some marks. And then that specific question, a client will send an email to you. So what you must do is you read the required part. You do not have to send an email back because that is just to make the paper more interesting. Now there you're going to deal with a building contractor. It's very important when you think of a building contractor, what do they do in practice? How does it work? And what elements um, is actually applied to all the contracts? And there you will get contract 1, 18 marks, and 6 marks for contract 2. And then remember, if I do my calculations, if you add everything, these marks plus the 3, you'll get to your uh, 27 marks. Yeah, I think I'm right. Okay, contractors, here's the issue. You must understand a contract. If you understand the contractor, how it works, then it will be easy for you. And here, a big issue is the year of assessment. So write it down. Say, for instance, the year of assessment ends on 28 February 2025. When does it start? It starts on 1 March 2024, and then it stops at 28 February 2025. Okay, what happens before the year end? Very important. Then you must decide whether it has any implications for this year of assessment, and anything after the year end, does it have any implication for this year? So you must always take that amounts or those issues and bring it back to your present year of assessment to see does it apply or not. Okay, a deposit received. You will always see something like a deposit received. And what you get is you get an upfront payment before the work starts. You will not start building let's say, a house for somebody, and then you hope you're going to get something back at the end of the day. No, it doesn't work like that. Usually, what they ask in terms of a contractor, they want an upfront payment. And before the work starts, and usually they use that upfront payment to buy the material with. So that it's a use. So the deposit is they use it for their own benefit because they are going to use that money to buy the materials. Then those two goes together. Those two goes together. The retention period and amount and the completion certificate. Those two means, what does it mean? That you will get a completion certificate. It's okay, everything is fine. I can see there's a building, it looks okay, it's fine, and then somebody will sign it off. But then there's a period after that completion certificate. After that. And that is a type of guarantee after the completion, that is for defects. You must remember there can be anything. For instance, everything looks fine, but say, for instance, in a month's time, there's a plumbing problem. You cannot see it, but after, say, 1 or 2 or 3 months, you detect that. Now, it depends on the retention period. When does it stop? You cannot have a retention period forever. So in the contract, there will be a period where it stops. So when the certificate is completed and given to the client, completion certificate by an outside party, there will always be a time lag to when you will receive the retention or not. Okay. And then penalties for late completion, you get it. Because, say for instance, I want contractor is building a sorry sorry for that. Is that okay? Say for instance, I use contractors to build a shopping mall, and the contract specifies that it will be completed, say 31 December. And then, because it's the shopping center, then I will secure tenants. But if the contractors are late, then I've got a problem. What I'm going to do with the tenants, because it's not completed yet, and therefore there's steep penalties for late completion, especially on big contracts. And they usually calculate it per day. Okay. Now, the other one is when you've got disagreements. When you work with contractors, there's always a disagreement. Either they do not want to pay the money, or you made a big mess. Doesn't matter which side. But when you work with these disagreements, you must always go to the fact who is suing who. Um, the contractor suing the client, or the client uh, suing the contractor. There's contractor, client, client, or contractor. And then, for example, the client does not pay the retention money for whatever reason, and that's very similar to the treatment of compensation for damages, both sides. Remember, both sides. Make sure, is it income for me, or is it an expense? Now, issue, and I've said that already, is the year of assessment. Things are going to happen before the year of assessment, and there's things that are going to happen after the year of assessment, and you must decide where those amounts, does it have an effect on the current year of assessment. Then deposits received, nothing for yourself. A deposit is something that you receive before it accrues to you. Okay, and that deposit, you must go and think, what is the test? We are working now with gross income. I receive a deposit, and now you must go to the test. What is the test? The test is that you receive it for your own benefit. And then you go to the part case as well, where they actually specify that you mix that deposits with your own money, and it's not in a trust account. Then it is at that stage that you receive it is gross income. Go to the Geldenhuys case and the Pied case, and that's the principle. Then the completion certificate, and I've explained that already, it goes hand in hand with the retention money. The guarantee is retention money, and that is when your building is completed, but the period of guarantee It's not over yet. But remember, a retention cannot be forever. It will stop. And when it stops, then obviously, can I claim that amount? Does it accrue to me if the client doesn't pay me? So there is when does it accrue to me, that retention period money? When it's at the end of the retention period, you must think about that, or is it the beginning of the retention period? And therefore, you've got case law. So I haven't received my retention money yet, but your test is when does it accrue? When do you get, when are you going to be entitled to it? Unconditionally entitled to it. So you can claim and go to court when your client doesn't pay you. And then penalties for late completion, I've already discussed that. When there's a disagreement, is it the client that sues the contractor or the contractor that sues the client? So it's either or. For the one, it will be gross income. For the other one, it might be a general deduction. So you must just think about this whole penalty issue. And the main issue is that when we work with penalties, remember, it's just the main issue. It doesn't mean you stop there with the discussion and say, yeah, but she said that. It's not what it is. I said the main issue. It's not the only issue that you must discuss. But your major time will be on that specific test. But there's also other issues in the production of income. For instance, there's also is it of a capital nature. Now, question 3. Obviously, you will have to write a memorandum, but that memorandum will be provided for you, and it will count 30 marks, including 3 marks for presentation. There's 2 issues. And the first issue is, obviously, if it is section 11A and section 23E, obviously you must first discuss section 11A, and if section 23 might be applicable, might be. It's not necessarily going to be applicable, but that's one of the facts that you should consider. And if you go back, and it is in your notes, is that it states any money claimed as a deduction from income derived from a trade to the extent to which such monies were not laid out or expended for the purpose of trade. So you get the trade part, you will get as a deduction under section 11A. But if there's, for instance, a private part involved in that total payment, there must be an apportionment, and there's 2 cases that are applicable. Go to your cases. Now, question 3, issue 2, 20 marks. Here you must think a little bit. And that is, it's actually not a difficult question, but just you must think and apply your mind. And it's about the gross income. The client argues that the amount received is of a capital nature. Now, your client is not stupid. Your client went also and did his or her homework, or its homework, and in that specific issue, they mentioned 3 cases that back up the client's argument. Now, if you think about capital nature, what's the whole issue here? Gross income, capital nature. You want it to be capital nature because it's not gross income. Fortunately, you do not have to do capital gains tax. So it has to do with the issue of a capital nature. Now, they mentioned 3 cases to back up the argument. Okay, but those 3 principles, you must be, those 3 cases, you must be very careful. You must go to that case, you must discuss the principle, and then you will analyze what they are saying, and then you will do or state your answer. Now, here I say firstly discuss the general rule. That's the way, it's not in the question that I've stated that. But what you will do first, what is an amount received or accrued to? When is it of a capital nature? Discuss the general rule of intention. Remember, you work with gross income. Gross incomes, you discuss of a capital nature. It starts with what is your intention with that asset. Okay. And now you're going to analyze three cases that they are going to give to you. Now you discuss the general rule of intention with reference to the case law. Always, it's so easy. And secondly, you analyze the client's arguments. You go back to those three cases and you say, okay, in this case, this is the principle. And then at the last thing that you must do if you disagree, then you discuss your point of view with reference to case law. That will be obviously something opposite to what they said and how the principles of this case apply to the issue. This is not difficult. This is just a plain, common, capital nature question. Nothing weird. It's just that for the first time you are going to get a question or case study where your client actually refer you to case law to back the argument. Now, yeah, I make it very easy for you. Gross income, accrued to. I've spoken about that. Later gaan and mooi unconditionally entitled to it. Now go back. Where did we deal with unconditionally entitled to? We dealt with that in the retention fees, I think. Received by, I think we've discussed that when we dealt with deposits. Here they are. Capital nature, gross income, that must be question 3. Issue, let me think, it must be issue. Come on, let me think. Issue 2. Issue 2. Where your client relies on 3, 1, 2, 3. One of those three cases they will rely on. Okay, and then you must go and then you, out of a logic, if you think logically about it, then you will go back and then you will analyze the discussion and then you will give your point of view. So these case law or cases are applicable to question 3. You can hear I haven't got the paper. Now the general deduction formula, section 11A and section 23, I've already discussed that you are going to get, and I've said that in the question, section 23G. Okay. Actually incurred, go to that case. In the production of income, it's always there. Prohibited deductions, that means that you will not be able to claim everything and of a capital nature. Those are not a lot. Those are not a lot, and it has to deal with deductions. So you can go back to the examples that I've given you and you can decide where it applies. Let me see if I've got some. You just say, no, I've got nothing more to say to you. All that I can say is good luck, and I hope that this recording actually assisted you. I'm going to have a live class, but it's much easier sometimes to just do a recording beforehand so that the students can ask questions, and it makes it easier for everyone. So thank you.